Come on, let's go shoeing. To start, there is many types of snowshoes to choose from. They can be broken down into two types or categories. One being the traditional snowshoe, and then followed by the modern snowshoe, which has probably been responsible for the resurgence of snowshoeing for fitness and for ease of use to help the modern trapper or explorer or bushcrafter. So on a traditional snowshoe, many types of wood are used to actually make the shoe or the frame of it. The preferred wood actually is ash. And what winds up happening is that the ash is shaped by using draw knives, and then it is steam bent and put into a frame to actually create the bends. You can see here, this is a shorter snowshoe. The toe is not as extreme a bend in the toe. Traditional makers of snowshoes also use babbage, which is actually rawhide, to create the webbing. Now if you look at the webbing on this shoe here, you'll notice that in the toe and in the heel, the webbing is not as thick as where your feet would be, where it needs to disperse the weight evenly as you walk. This is one type of binding that's on the shoe. There's many types of bindings that you can put on, and we'll talk about that later. The shoe that you're looking at here is a bear paw. It's the smallest shoe that I own. It allows you to move amongst heavy dense brush and heavier wooded areas than the other two, for the simple reason that it doesn't have a long tail to get hung up or to drag while you're moving through the woods. These snowshoes here are the longest snowshoes that I have, but they are also the most narrow snowshoes that I have. These are known as an Alaskan or a trapper version. These will allow me to, as I am moving over open fields and rolling hills, to take greater strides without changing my gait. That was one of the reasons why they were preferred for trappers to cover ground as opposed to the shorter snowshoes such as a bear paw or a Huron, which is the next snowshoe that I'm going to show you. Last but not least, the Huron, the Michigan, or the Beavertail, whichever you'd like to go by. This is that transitional shoe that does both. It allows you to move about in more dense areas. Yes, it still does have a toe, but it's not as long as the Trapper or the Alaskan. The other thing that it allows you to do is when you're out in rolling country, you could still take that longer stride without too much of an adjustment in your gait, which is dictated by the width of the snowshoe. Let's talk about the modern snowshoe for a second. Now, the modern snowshoe, again, like I said, for ease of use, if you are a beginner to snowshoeing, there's just really nothing easier to get into than a shoe of this nature. They're made out of modern materials. The frames are made out of aircraft aluminum. The decks are made out of ABS plastic. Your bindings are made of plastic, and they have a lot of adjustment. You know, relatively maintenance free. They offer a chance for you to get out and get snowshoeing with no problems. How do snowshoes work? It's really very simple. It just displaces your weight over a given surface. You will sink into the snow, yes, but not as much as you would if you didn't have the snowshoes. The snowshoes allow you great mobility as far as checking your traps, continuing hunting in bad weather. You can use the snowshoe as a shovel to create snow shelters if you need to. And you can be assured that you're going to give yourself more of a chance to get where you need to be instead of exhausting yourself through post-holing. Snowshoeing is not hard to do. In fact, it's actually very easy. But there are a few things that you have to learn about them. And that's what we're going to cover today. Some things are a little bit more technical, like tying an Indian hitch and a pair of traditional bear paws, but that's okay, because that's on our list of things to discuss. Let's keep going. As you're walking on snowshoes and as you're learning to walk on them and to be more proficient with your movements through the woods, you're going to start to get used to the feel of the weight of the snowshoe, the actual feel of the shoe itself, the balance of the snowshoe, the comfort, your stance, and your gait. With the exception of possibly the bear paw and a larger or wider snowshoe, you really don't have to change your gait too much. When you adjust your gait, you are going to feel it in your hip flexors a little bit more than you normally would. One of the best advantages of snowshoeing is the fact that it does give you a good cardio workout. When approaching an object such as this log right here, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we try not to, at best, bridge the object. And what I mean by that is, we don't want to set up our snowshoe like this on an angle from behind and then try to step over it. And we also don't want to come down like that. This is known as bridging. You can see the angle of my snowshoe. The easiest way to go over an obstacle like this, okay, we don't want to do this either because we don't want to rock back and forth. We come up to the object, go step over it, shift our weight, come back, and continue on our way. Turning in a pair of snowshoes can sometimes be a little bit difficult. The easiest way when wearing bear paws actually is very simply, I'm going to turn to the left. So what you want to do is you shift your weight to your right leg. Take your left foot, put it out to the side, shift your weight there, and bring your right leg around. Do it again, put your weight to the right, move your left, and then bring your right back around. Now I've completely turned around and I can go back. Okay, in the case of the longer snowshoes, such as the Trapper or the Huron, when turning around, it's just about the same thing, except for the fact that when you are turning, you're going to have to exaggerate your stance a little bit more, meaning making it wider, and you may have to do a couple more turns. It's almost like doing a K-turn. So again, you're going to put your weight, if you're turning to the left, put your weight on your right leg, move your left leg out without covering the tail in the back, then bring your right leg over. Again, bring it out, and then bring your right leg. Okay? And now we're turned around and we're ready to go. So now comes that time where we want to pick the snowshoes that we want. You know, we know that there's different types of snowshoes, but how do we actually match them to what we want to do? Well, you should start by thinking about the activity that you're going to use them. If you're just going to go out and do general bushcrafting, and you're going to be in the woods, and it's, you know, not too much of a dense forest, but it is manageable and you can move around, you know, you match the snowshoe to that condition. The other thing is too that you're going to want to start to think about the different snow conditions that you may experience on a daily basis. You know, here in the Northeast, a lot of times we'll get a lot of powder. We don't get that heavy, wet western snow with a lot of moisture. Sometimes we do get it. Most of the time, like right now, our conditions are the snow came down, it was pretty light and fluffy, and then there was a layer of rain that went over the top, so now we wind up getting a crust over it. You know, think about if you're going to use it for trail walking. You know, you're not really into going out into the woods, so you want to stay on a controlled trail. It's going to be another type of snowshoe. You may not want to have such a large snowshoe. You may also have to decide whether or not you want to go with traditional or whether or not you want to go with modern. And all these things you have to take into consideration. You know, again, do your own research for what you're going to do. Make it applicable for yourself. If I was a first-time snowshoer, I would probably have done it differently than what I did. I went out, I bought a pair of Michigans, and I used them until a couple of times I went up into the Adirondacks and I fell flat on my face trying to go up, you know, steep inclines, hiking in the wintertime, up some of the peaks that are there in the high peaks region. Well, that's because I didn't do my research. You know, along the way though, I learned and I picked up a pair of technical snowshoes. So now I have the best of both worlds. I have my traditionals for going out and meandering in the woods or wherever I want to go, and then I have my technical snowshoes when I want to make those ascents. Okay, and that's what I'm talking about. Again, what works for me may not work for you. I love snowshoes, I love snowshoeing, and I love having different pairs of snowshoes, and I use all of my snowshoes. I don't just have wall hangers. All right, the wall hangers are for later on when I want to, you know, put up a nice den and have a different collection of, you know, snowshoes. You know, some antique ones that you find when you're going out antiquing. So, you know, keep in mind all these things. Talk about your terrains, talk about your snow conditions, talk about how you want to use them and how they're going to be applicable for yourself. Okay? Hey, this is pretty important. I forgot to tell you about this. When you're picking your snowshoes, you know, most of the time it's based upon your weight. Okay? So, have your weight. Keep that in mind when you're picking snowshoes. But the really important part of that is that dependent upon your pack, you have to scale your snowshoes to the weight of yourself plus your pack. So don't forget that. Okay, let's talk about bindings. I have 3 examples of bindings that I'm familiar with that I use all the time. I find these to be the better bindings for me as I've acclimated myself to them. The easiest of all of the bindings, obviously, is the modern snowshoe. It's very simple. Okay, they accommodate any boot that you could possibly think of. You put them on, you can clip right in. Great adjustments. And then the crampon. If you take a look at the snowshoe itself, you don't have that much of a pivot when you're using a traditional snowshoe. So being that we have these crampons, it actually allows you to dig in and climb very easy, well, not very easy, but easier on a steep incline than a traditional snowshoe. The second binding I'm going to show you is one of 2 bindings that I like to use when I'm wearing my mucklucks. All right, especially when I'm using traditional snowshoes. The first binding that I want to talk about is this very simple binding. It's woven into the toe box here and has one nylon strap that interweaves back and forth much like a lace. You adjust the heel strap in the back by a simple buckle. So you would step in, adjust your foot, tighten this down, and then tighten your heel strap. The last binding is very simply a cotton webbing or a lamp wick, which was traditionally used on your snowshoes. This is probably one of the most challenging or the most daunting things to put on, which is what I believe is another contributing factor is why people don't like to have traditional snowshoes. They are very simple. Now, I've shown 2 hitches in the past that I've used, and the hitch that I'm going to show you now is actually a variation of what's known as the Indian hitch. And I think I've done it 3 times, and I'm still playing with all 3 versions of it to see which one I actually like better if I needed to go to it and do it all the time. What you're going to do is you're going to start with about 5 to 6 feet of lamp wick or this cotton webbing. You're going to see an outermost hole, and you're going to go down in there, and you're going to come up, bring the tail end through the toe box. Same thing on the other side. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your lamp wick and you're going to start wrapping. Same thing on the other side until you come and you meet in the middle. Okay, keeping that nice and tight. Then we're going to come around from behind our ankle again, and we're going to tie this off, just like that. And that is how you actually tie the traditional Indian hitch. This is another hitch that I recently learned, and this is a modified version of an Indian hitch. I'm going to show you how we get to this hitch. How we get to this hitch, very simply, is we start off with our lamp wick. We feed in through this hole and come up through the toe box. That's the first thing. Now, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to come down through the same hole, but you're going to come up through the toe box here. Start to snug up a little bit here, and what you're going to do is you come there, and crossing over the top here, and then I'm going under there. Okay. Yeah, you're going to want to cinch this up, as so, and then come right around your ankle, come up, and just tie this off. You can tie it off in a bow, or you can tie it off in just an overhand square knot. That is the modified Indian hitch. Hey, let's have the pole talk. I know what you're going to say. I saw the video too. Dave calls Jimmy. Jimmy says he got to go out and do a video. He tells Dave Brian's old. His bones hurt. He's old. Yeah. Know why I'm old? Because I got wisdom. Because I learned. And I use things that are beneficial. And it's called working smarter, not harder, Jimmy. Okay, a little bit about myself. I played hockey for 15 years. Every day I wake up, my knees let me know that. So why wouldn't I use something that's going to help me go that much farther and continue on and not get hurt anymore. Poles. This is where I like to use poles the most. If I'm doing technical stuff, like I said, if I'm in the Adirondacks and I have a heavy load, I use these to steady myself. That's when we start talking about the balance when we walk in our snowshoes. All right? The simple fact of the matter is this, is that if you bend over a little bit too much with that pack, the momentum of the weight of the pack will pull you over. And nothing stinks more than laying in 3.5 feet of powder trying to get out of that powder. Okay? Because you're doing the turtle. And it's not pretty. All right? And then you wind up getting wet and everything else. And it's just, now you put yourself in a bad situation. We want to avoid this. All right? They're easy to use now. They get small, compact. Put them in your pack for when you need them. All right? On descents, they're beautiful because you can put these right out in front of you and you can do what you need to do. When you're going up, you have 3 points of contact as well. All right? There's a reason why mountain climbers use ice axes while they're up there. All right? It's to help themselves. It's to steady themselves while they're making their ascents. This is no different. This is just on a different level. All right? So think about that too. You may want to get an inexpensive pair, and you may want to put them to work. And then someday, Jimmy may even get old too. So before we get out of here, in closing with this episode, let's talk about maintenance for your snowshoes. You know, before you go out, you know, it's a good idea to inspect your snowshoe. Make sure that the rawhide on the traditionals, that none of it has dry rotted, okay, and no spot needs to be hit with your spar varnish, which is exactly one of those things that you're going to need. So let's talk about some things that you're going to need to keep your snowshoes running well. Well, we need marine spar varnish, we need sandpaper, and we need extra rawhide. The rawhide obviously is to replace any of the weaving that has, you know, worn itself out or has broken. The spar varnish is to go on top of the frame of the snowshoe, as well as the weaving part, or the babbage, the weaving, the rawhide. And the sandpaper is to just smooth out the rough spots that you may encounter from hitting branches or any abrasions, you know, to the snowshoe itself that you picked up from maybe crusty snow, or, you know, stepping over rocks or things of that nature that you don't see under the snow. Visually inspect your snowshoe. Look up in here where the cross pieces, you know, that's probably the weakest areas. It is susceptible to that only because, you know, when you're cutting, when they actually make the snowshoe, you know, they're removing wood and they're putting it inside. So that's one thing that you would want to check. Check all the outside lashings of the weaving. Make sure that there's none cut, or, you know, none of them are greatly abrased. And then once you've inspected it and made sure that it's okay and that there's no cracks, you know, in any of the frame, then you know what, go about your business. One thing with traditional snowshoes though, dependent upon your snow conditions that you have, and dependent upon the number of times that you actually go snowshoeing, you may have to revarnish your shoes, you know, 2 or 3 times in a year. Okay, that's another good reason to have multiple pairs of snowshoes. While one's drying, you can grab another set and you can continue on. And you can rotate them out as well. As far as your modern snowshoe, say this is another pair that I have. Okay, they're pretty indestructible, like I said. You know, again, do a cursory inspection of your snowshoe. You know, we want to make sure that the binding is still in place, that it doesn't need, you know, any repair whatsoever. You know, see, make sure that the nuts are still here. Make sure that the pivot works well. You know, check and see if your webbing here has been, you know, ripped or torn, that, you know, may need some type of replacing. Although on some of your manufacturers, depending upon whether or not a company will honor, what they say. Again, some companies are being outsourced, and we're just not going to get into that. You get what you pay for in some cases. So we look at our binding, and we look here at the bottom at the crampons. Are they dull now? Have I gone over so many rocks that I've, dulled these up? Do they need sharpening? Check out, you may have to take a file to them. You may have to, put a nice edge and a point back on your crampon. Check your rivets. You look on here, there's rivets all around this deck. Make sure all your rivets are in place. Make sure you have them there. If not, you may have to send them back to the manufacturer, or you may have to be able to try to pop a rivet back in there yourself. Snowshoes, a viable piece of kit. You can use them for a lot of different things. There's obviously a lot of choices. But when you're traveling in snow country, it's probably a pretty good idea to have them with you, along with a shovel, blankets, extra clothing, and boots. All extras that you have to make your life a little bit more comfortable in case something should happen or you break down. We discussed the different types of snowshoes, moderns, traditionals, and the different shapes and sizes that are all made in those different configurations. Until the next one, take it easy.